The Chicago Bears outcoached the Green Bay Packers in the second half thanks to some really smart halftime adjustments by both Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. And on the show today, we're going to break down what the Chicago Bears did differently in the second half that really turned things around and secured a miraculous comeback victory in the wildcard round against the Green Bay Packers. We'll look at what Dennis Allen did differently from a coverage standpoint and maybe less different than you think from a blitz standpoint, but some nuance in there for sure. We'll take a look at how this Bears offense got going in the second half after a very slow start. And we'll also have to look at the adjustments that they will have to make now with key injuries at both left tackle and linebacker. I do want to thank you for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. We all watched this Bears defense get a little bit too easily run over in the first half, right? Packers come out and score touchdowns after touchdowns after touchdowns on really their first 3 drives of the game there, right? Late in the first quarter, then in the second, and then late in the second quarter there. A little bit too easy for Jordan Love and company to take the ball down the field and score points. And we were sitting at home seeing a lot of man coverage over and over again, and the Bears not being able to cover that, not being able to get much pass rush on Jordan Love. And it was like, oh no, this defense is absolutely falling apart. And then TJ Edwards gets hurt. We'll talk about that. And they didn't even use Kyler Gordon for the first quarter or whatever of the game before he got in there. And it was a whole lot of disaster on defense. But in the second half, they come out and force Packer punts on the first 3 drives of the second half. They also hold them to a field goal that gets missed and then another punt after that. And all of a sudden, it was a new Bears defense, and they gave this Bears offense hope and some breathing room and enough time to slowly climb back into this game with field goals and then eventually touchdowns that help you win it. And so I was really curious to take a look at just what was so different in that second half that slowed the Packers down so much. And I think we can confidently say some of it is on the Packers, right? I think they got a little too conservative. They got a little bit too predictable in terms of just wanting to run the ball and kind of slow things down and take their foot off the gas. Like some of it you can point to, Matt LaFleur and company on that side, but definitely some key things that stand out to me from Dennis Allen's first half in the second half. In the first half, Packers had 15 passing plays. The Bears blitzed on 6 of them, so about a third of those plays. But on those 6 blitzes, the Bears only got pressure 1 time. One of those 6 blitzes actually affected Jordan Love, so he could sit back and attack them and kind of have fewer defenders in coverage, but no additional stress on the quarterback makes life difficult for a defense. In the first half, the Bears ran a lot of cover 1, single deep, man coverage plays. They mixed in a little bit of cover 4 to try and take away some of the deep stuff from the Packers, but then they were having easy underneath throws with space to run after the catch because you had so many players deep and not enough guys underneath that it just created some more challenges. And sometimes that cover 4 ends up looking like man coverage in a lot of ways on deep routes because you still got guys covering one-on-one. So it just became pretty easy for the Packers offense to see what the Bears were doing. Then the Bears didn't run any cover 2 zone in the first half. They ran 1 play cover 3. So basically, if they were in single deep safety, it was man coverage. If they were in 2 deep safeties, it was cover 4. And that was as much variety as the Bears were getting. Not a lot of pressure on the blitzes that they did. All the blitzes came out of man coverage in those situations. So it was kind of predictable in some ways. They blitzed Jaquan Brisker a couple times. They brought a linebacker a couple times, but they weren't really getting home and they weren't really having much luck with it. But you go into the second half, and clearly some changes here. Now, I think when we were watching it live, it felt like they were blitzing Jordan Love a lot more in the second half than they were in the first half. That was not the case in terms of the number of times, or I should say the rate of times in which Dennis Allen is blitzing the quarterback. It was 11 out of 31 in the second half. So again, like about a third, give or take. But they got pressure on 5 of those 11 blitzes. And so instead of 1 out of 6 getting pressure, it was 5 out of 11. You go from whatever 1/6 maths out to as a percentage. I don't know that off the top of my head. Just under 20% to 5 out of 11 is just under 50%. So your blitzing was twice as effective in the second half. I think some of that was he brought Jaquan Brisker a bunch more. He also mixed some things up and put some things on tape that we have not seen the Bears defense do all season. In this game, in the second half, Jalen Johnson blitzed from a wide cornerback position, and Nahshon Wright blitzed from a wide cornerback position. Those far-reaching cornerback blitzes. This is the second game all season where either one of them has done that. Jalen Johnson blitzed once in, I think, week 2 against the Lions, and Nahshon Wright blitzed once in week 3 against the Cowboys. Dennis Allen does not blitz his outside cornerbacks, and he did it twice against the Packers in the second half to send some different looks and some different pressures that they were having trouble picking up. He got Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon closer to the defensive ends and knifing in on some of those blitzes that were a lot more effective. DeMarco Jackson blitzing a bit more in the second half as well, and all those guys proved to be more effective blitzers. You also saw him then mix things up from a coverage perspective on the back end. Now, when they blitz, it was almost exclusively still man coverage blitzes, still mostly cover 1, a couple cover 0 blitzes. So not a lot of like blitz disguise, zone blitzing or anything that I would like to see more of. But when they didn't blitz in the second half, the Bears ran a bunch of cover 2. They didn't run any cover 2 in the first half, 2 deep safeties, zone underneath. They ran a lot more of that in the second half. They didn't run as much cover 4 quarters in there, but they ran more cover 3 zones. So all of a sudden now it was, if you're in single deep safety, you're not sure if it's going to be man or zone because they were playing a little bit of zone in those single deep coverages. And they were going to 2 deep coverages that had more help underneath in cover 2 as opposed to having everything deep in cover 4, but you still have those 2 deep safeties to take away some of the deep stuff, but then more guys underneath to tackle when they do end up throwing short. And I think that combination of more coverage variety, and I think coverages that made more sense in the matchup and in the game, while the Packers then took their foot off the gas, and while the Bears blitzed a little bit more effectively and smartly, if you would say, efficiently, like they mixed things up in there, that all added up to a much better Bears defensive performance. Like, I don't think you can pinpoint on one thing as like that was the difference in the game, but I think it's like 20% Packers taking the foot off the gas a little bit, 20% more effective blitzes in there, 20% better coverage variety in there, and then 20% luck, 20% players playing better. I mean, you can kind of throw it in a lot of different directions here, but there were some very clear adjustments from Dennis Allen that yielded positive results. And so now moving forward, I would love to see him go into a game proactive in those adjustments, as opposed to, it seems like every week they're starting with the same kind of first half game plan, like a lot of single deep, a lot of man coverage, blitzing with man coverage, and every single week it doesn't work. And then every single week they adjust again at halftime, and the defense is way better in the second half. So why they keep starting the same way and not just like keeping some of the adjustments, saying, oh, that hasn't worked all season, so maybe let's try some different things. I don't know. Dennis Allen knows a heck of a lot more about football and coaching than I ever will. So I'm never going to sit here and say I know better what he should be doing and calling for the Bears defense, but I will still look and see what he does and what worked and what didn't. And that's what I was trying to do here on the Locked On Bears podcast. Same thing for the Bears offense, where you're getting 3 points in the first half and even only field goals in the third quarter before the fourth quarter really comes alive. And I want to take a closer look at like what Caleb Williams was doing throughout those stretches and how the offense, I guess, what was holding the offense back early on that maybe wasn't holding them back in the fourth quarter and late in the game down the stretch. That's next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. The Locked On Bears podcast is also brought to you by Quo. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make, and that's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Q-U-O, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number so nothing gets missed, and everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal right from your phone or computer. And you can even keep your existing number. It's no surprise Quo is the number one rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNFL. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNFL. Quo. No missed calls, no missed customers. The Bears were clearly missing something in the first half on both sides of the ball, but the offense in particular started slow once again. 3 points in the first half, struggling to get out of the gate. First drive, third down after third down after third down converted. They down in the red zone, and it was, a 16-play drive. Like, there was momentum, but yet not, there were points, I guess, but not touchdowns, right? And then they couldn't sustain that on subsequent drives. And it's this sort of like frustrating cycle of like, what's wrong with this offense? And I think so often it's easy to look at Caleb Williams' completion percentage and his interceptions and say, wow, there's your problem, right? If you just looked at the box score and watched nothing around the game, you would look at that and say, oh, that must be why the offense started so slow, because his completion percentage was so low. And that's not at all the case, or at least it's not Caleb Williams' fault that his completion percentage was so low and the offense started slow. Perhaps, when he's throwing it away on third down, that contributes to the slow start, but he's making the smart play by throwing it away, and it's other things that are going wrong in terms of pass protection and receivers route running and separation, right? Other things are going wrong that leads to the offense struggling a little bit. But like, when I go back through and rewatch Caleb Williams on the All-22 film, in the first half, I counted 3 passes from Caleb that were like aimed, inaccurate passes that, like, you want him to hit that and he just missed it. That was it. And wasn't like, 3 passes was still nothing for one half, right? It was 3 out of his, I got his first half numbers hiding here, 3 out of his 17 pass attempts were inaccurate. He was 8 of 17. So out of the 9 incompletions, I think 3 of them were Caleb being inaccurate. But then you had, throwaways, he was hit while he was throwing, you had pass breakups where the receiver the ball hits the receiver and then he can't hang on to it through contact, but it's still an accurate pass by Caleb Williams. Like, when he set and aimed his throws, he missed 3 of them in the first half. I don't think that was like problem number 1 that was contributing to a slow start. I think it was a factor. I'm not to say that he was 0% to blame, but it was not like the only thing. Like, when you look at how some of these drives ended early in the game, right? First drive where they settle for a field goal, they get third down in the red zone, everything's covered. Caleb kind of leaves the pocket and looks for something and just kind of has to throw it away. Throws like a kind of a high jump ball that no one can get a hand on. So you settle for a field goal. Like, you can chuck it up to good coverage by the defense, or you chuck it up to receivers not being open, or maybe a play call route concept that you might not like, whatever it might be. I can call that a defensive stop. But then second drive ends on the miscommunication with Luther Burden, where Caleb throws it to a spot that Luther Burden is supposed to be at. Luther Burden is not at that spot. It's fourth down. It's intercepted. Turnover on down. Well, I guess the interception is the turnover. Would have been a turnover on downs either way. Like, that's a miscommunication. That's a self-inflicted wound by the offense, not a bad throw by Caleb or a great play by the defense, but just receiver error ending a Bears drive. Third drive of the game, I'll tell you, Caleb Williams was inaccurate. It's a fourth down. Colson Loveland working over the middle of the field, just puts it too far, I think, in front of him, if I'm thinking of the play right. They just needed to get it. Quarterback missed it. All right, I'm good with that. Like, I can accept that. Yep, Caleb missed one at the end of the first half there. Turnover and downs on fourth down. Player was open, quarterback couldn't get to him. Yep, there's one of 3 first half drives. Part of the problem, you only have 3 first half drives because your defense wasn't getting off the field. But one of 3 first half drives ends on a missed throw from Caleb Williams. I can give him then even 33% of the blame for the first half, but that's 66% that gets spread elsewhere on miscommunications, defensive plays, coverage, pass protection breakdowns, et cetera, et cetera. Second half, there was a couple good coverage plays. You get the pressure in his face on the jump ball interception in the red zone where Drew Dahlman, I think, was the one who missed a block and let the pass rusher come right into Caleb's face. DJ Moore slips and falls down. Caleb's under pressure and just has to float it up there to give a shot at it because it's fourth down, so you throw it up, and that one gets picked off. The next drive after that ends in a strip sack when Ozzy Trapilo gets smoked by Lucas Van Ness, and Caleb Williams is hitting like 2.5 seconds before he has a chance to get the ball out. And you settle for a field goal there, but then it's touchdown, final 3 drives of the game. Like it's sort of like a combination of a bunch of different things all going wrong in the first half of like little things here and there. Offensive line, receiver, sometimes quarterback, sometimes defense. Like, yeah, it's the same sort of things we talked about against the Detroit Lions. Like, you can't necessarily pinpoint one little thing that's going wrong that is the big fatal flaw of the Bears offense in these slow starts. It's like always a little something different moving around. And that to me tells me young, inexperienced team that's still trying to figure things out even on the fly, even in the playoffs. That also tells you that it's not necessarily the Packers or in the last 2 weeks opposing defenses really consistently stopping them. It's a little bit more them stopping themselves. So like any given Sunday, they could stop stopping themselves in the first half and be a lot. It's like the biggest obstacle is in between their ears, right? It's in their own building. It's not necessarily the opposing defense in a lot of these games. So I think that there's a sign for encouragement that things can be better. Also a sign for discouragement that we're entering what'll this be, the 19th game of the season then? 17 weeks plus 1 is 19 game of the season, and they still have little mistakes like that. I think it's part of the learning and growing process here. But one of the things Ben Johnson did differently in the second half was apparent right away from the get-go. Do you remember the play where Theo Benedict lined up at wide receiver and ran like a deep, skinny post route, and they showed it on the broadcast of, holy crap, there's an offensive lineman sprinting at 15 miles an hour up the field pretending to be a wide receiver? As much as we can point to that and say, like, oh, there's wild and crazy Ben Johnson coming up with some plays, that was a key part of the second half adjustment. And we didn't really necessarily notice it or see it at the time, but that was really big. Like, not necessarily that play specifically, but what that play represented. In the second half, the Bears ran a lot more plays with what they call 13 personnel, 3 tight ends on the field. Sometimes one of those tight ends was an offensive lineman named Theo Benedict, but like 1 wide receiver and 1 running back. Like, that's kind of the thing to remember for these packages. In the second half, they ran a lot more plays, whether it's just 1 wideout, just 1 running back, and the rest are offensive linemen and tight ends. And that was a very strategic decision by Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, in general, runs more of that personnel than most other offensive play callers. But if you look at how it played out in this game against the Packers, in the first quarter, mostly on that first drive, the Bears used that 13 personnel 4 times and ran the ball on 3 of those 4 times. It was like, get some extra bodies in there and pound the rock. You go into the second half, and Ben Johnson realized, hey, when we bring 3 tight ends on the field, or an extra offensive lineman, the Packers are, of course, going into their base defense. They're putting 4 defensive backs in the field, 2 safeties, 2 corners, and then they load up with linebackers and defensive linemen. So he said, okay, they're in a much less advantageous position to defend the pass in that personnel, right? They have fewer coverage guys, more run-stopping guys. So what do? You put 3 tight ends on the field, but you come out in shotgun and you put one of your offensive linemen at wide receiver, and all of a sudden you've taken a bunch of linebackers and defensive linemen that were loading the box and spreading them out wide and making them try and cover up and down the field. The Bears passed on 5 out of their 13 personnel plays in the second half. All of them were in base defense of the Packers. And when the Packers are in base defense, like most teams in base defense, you run a lot more zone. Even if you're a man-to-man team, you run more zone in base defense. Typically even like a lot of single high zone because you want to bring that safety in the box and stop the run because you're expecting a run because the other offense has heavy personnel on the field. So Ben Johnson knew, hey, I'll bring these tight ends on the field, but Loveland's a wide receiver. He's capable like a wide receiver. Cole Kmet is capable like a receiver. And Durham Smythe and Theo Bennett, you can move them around and put them wherever you want. They're kind of more decoys at that point, but you still run Theo Bennett deep to show opposing defenses, hey, he's a threat. He could catch the ball. They're not going to throw it to him, but he could be a threat. And I think it was really a nice adjustment there that got the Packers into predictable defenses that then Caleb Williams could line up and really take advantage of. And that's how you get Colston Loveland catching 8 passes for 137 yards because you get more base defense, more predictable zone coverages. The seams are open against cover 3. He can work those vertical seams, and boom, Loveland is cooking a bit in that game. So a lot of credit to Ben Johnson for making some adjustments to get a more predictable defense, and then the offense as a whole settling in a little bit, making fewer mistakes. That was the big difference on that side of the ball. Along the way, though, 2 very serious season-ending injuries for left tackle Ozzy Trapilo and linebacker TJ Edwards. That's going to require some midweek adjustments to the Bears' starting lineups and also maybe how they call the game coming up against Los Angeles Rams. So we'll take a look at the impact of Trapilo and Edwards' injuries and what the replacement plans might look like next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Gusto. Let's be real. No one starts a business for the joys of calculating tax withholdings or managing payroll spreadsheets. But that's where Gusto comes in, to take the stress out of payroll, benefits, and HR so you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is the all-in-one, remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, and fast. Whether you're hiring, onboarding, or paying employees, Gusto helps you do it all from one place without the hassle or hidden fees. They got automated tools like offer letters, onboarding materials, and direct deposits that can save you hours every single week, and they let you run unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price, which means no surprise charges at the end of the month. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/lockedonnfl and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's right, 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/lockedonnfl. One more time, that's GUSTO, gusto.com/lockedonnfl. The Locked On Bears podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and that means FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during these playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action because FanDuel users are going to get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app every playoff game day. It's a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to the bets you like the most. So you make your picks and then apply your profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. The boosts give you more juice on the bets that you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. So you could bet, say, this Bears-Rams matchup where the Bears are home underdogs. 3.5 points is where the line sits right now, but it's been moving and it may keep moving. But on game day morning, you can open up the FanDuel app and get your profit boost pack to get even bigger payouts on your bet. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL game day. Chicago Bears are going to have to make some real adjustments now for both the offensive line and the linebacker room. We could tell when TJ Edwards went down that one was serious, season ending, and speculation has begun about whether it will end his time with the Chicago Bears entirely. Ozzy Trapilo's injury, he was miraculously able to get off of the field and not cost the Bears a timeout or a 10-second runoff. I forgot. I'm assuming they had timeouts at that point. That had he gone down, it could have had gone down on the field and required assistance to leave the field. It could have hampered the Bears' comeback attempt. But Trapilo hopped to the sideline basically on one leg to make sure he was out of play before getting treatment for his injury, which is just, that's pain tolerance and toughness, man. You got to appreciate offensive linemen who embody that. Both of them are going to be significant losses for the Bears. It's easy to downplay and say, oh, well, Ozzy Trapilo was a rookie. He didn't play particularly well really the last couple of weeks. So ho-hum, you can plug and play Theo Benedette or maybe Braxton Jones in there, and you're not going to have that much of a drop-off at the position. And you can even make the argument of like, oh, well, TJ Edwards looked slow out there, and DeMarco Jackson has been great, so it's really not going to be that big of a deal to lose TJ Edwards. You'll be fine with DeMarco Jackson. And I think there is truth in all of that. I also think it's an oversimplification, and also I think misses some of the like bigger picture stuff here. Like you could, yes, on paper, has Ozzy Trapilo been worlds and worlds and worlds better than Theo Benedette and Braxton Jones? Maybe not. But Ozzy Trapilo has been the one practicing with the first team for the last, 6, 8, 10 weeks. I don't know how many weeks of the season he's been starting there now. He missed a game in there too, right? But like to be consistently out there practicing and playing every down, every game with Caleb Williams and feeling how Caleb Williams maneuvers the pocket next to Joe Thuney, and knowing how much space you got to give Joe Thuney, how much help he can and can't give you when you're run blocking, how to combo block and pass blocks off and work together on stuff. Like Trapilo has been the guy drilling that and repping that over and over and over and over again. And I know he's just a rookie, but it's that experience in season. Like, yeah, Braxton Jones has a bunch more experience than Ozzy Trapilo. And even Theo Benedette has practiced with you guys and started games in the NFL before. He's not coming in from scratch, but he hasn't been out there. Neither backup tackle has been out there for a month or two, right? So even if in a vacuum, they're, if you think about from their Madden ratings or whatever, might not be that far apart in terms of Ozzy Trapilo to the next left tackle, probably Theo Benedette. It's the functional familiarity of having been out there and building that cohesion and just the offensive, everybody's been together, plugging a new player in there is disruptive to everybody. Even if it's not that much worse of a player, you're missing the connective tissue that Trapilo had built up over time. I think the same thing is true, but to a lesser extent at linebacker with DeMarco Jackson and TJ Edwards, because at least, Edwards had missed plenty of time this season and DeMarco Jackson had filled in plenty this season. But I think there's something to be said about, especially in a playoff game situation, TJ Edwards has won a Super Bowl before. He has been to NFC championship games, plural, I think, in his career. Now I'm spacing on which Eagles runs he was a part of. I guess one NFC championship game and Super Bowl in the same year with the Eagles. But he's been in this was his fourth playoff trip. The moment's never going to be too big for TJ Edwards. DeMarco Jackson has played very well every time he has stepped on the field for the Chicago Bears this season. I have nothing bad to say about DeMarco Jackson. I think, honestly, he looks like a starting caliber NFL linebacker who maybe should be one of the Bears linebackers this next season. But this will be DeMarco Jackson's 5th career start. It will be his 2nd ever playoff game, and he really only played a half of that first playoff game against the Green Bay Packers, or maybe 3 quarters. TJ Edwards got hurt in the second quarter, so nonetheless, he may be more athletic, more agile, and to be honest, maybe even a better scheme fit right now in this Bears defense than TJ Edwards. But from a leadership, experience, mentorship standpoint, you are going to miss something by not having TJ Edwards out there that is going to hold the defense back in some ways. Now, I think that's easier to make up for with other guys stepping up. Grady Jarrett as a voice in the room. Tremaine Edmonds has some playoff experience. Kevin Byard. I think that's the lesser of the two disruptions. But boy, if you thought left tackle was already a little shaky, throwing a brand new guy who hasn't started in months. You need to send even more help for presumably Theo Benedict. We saw Theo Benedict come in when Trapilo went down. He only played 4 snaps at the end of that game, so he's still going to be rusty if he's the starter. Braxton Jones appears ready to come off of injured reserve, so I do think there is some amount of an interesting question there of like, do you go to Braxton Jones because he is the much more experienced player and like, you know, even though he hasn't played much this season, he still has a lot more experience under his belt, and you're not going to throw anything new. Like, the Rams aren't going to throw something new at Braxton Jones that he's never seen before. Whereas Theo Benedict, I think, has played a little bit better this season, but has 8 career starts under his belt compared to Braxton Jones has 44 career starts. Like, how much does experience matter in these playoffs? We saw on offense, they went with experience in Olamide Zaccheaus over Ja'Day Walker, who was a healthy scratch in that game. So, like, I do think they're going to go Theo Benedict. I mean, in large part, we saw Braxton Jones get benched for Theo Benedict already. So, in theory, Benedict is sort of ahead of Braxton Jones on the depth chart, and Jones is going to be a lot more rusty. Benedict's been out there as a tight end and has been healthy and active, at least in practicing. Braxton Jones has been practicing for like a week, but I think Braxton Jones will be the swing tackle. They'll activate him. He'll be the backup. Theo Benedict will start. You're going to have to put a lot of help on his side because this Rams pass rush is pretty good. We'll learn a lot more about this Rams pass rush on tomorrow's podcast because it'll be Crossover Thursday. We're going to be joined by Travis Rogers from Locked On Rams to get to know what to expect from an LA Rams team that I think is my personal Super Bowl favorite in the NFC, and yet the Carolina Panthers almost had them on the ropes last week. So they're a bit of a boom or bust team like the Chicago Bears. We'll find out just how similar they are in that regard and maybe how different they are in terms of playoff experience and reliability. So you got to make sure you come back and tune into that podcast tomorrow. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you are an everydayer who tunes in 5 days a week, thank you so much for tuning into Locked On Bears. We really do it for you, especially everyone who tunes in, but especially the everydayers. You are our diehards that we love. And if you want to take your listening to the next level, you can check out the Everydayer Club and get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Bears. It's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the podcasting apps. Plus, you'll get an invite to a members-only Locked On Everydayers Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of Locked On Bears. You can go to lockedonbears.supercast.com if you want to find out more. Otherwise, you can keep tuning in the same way you do every single day, and you'll leave each podcast with another opportunity to bear down.